Hey guys, welcome back to another Weird Wednesday. I'm Ashers, and this week it's not Ivy. This week I actually have
Pat O'Sullivan.
How you doing, Pat?
Good. How you doing?
I'm okay. So
Right. So
Ivy's had a lot of things going on in her life. Hopefully she will be back next week. But for now we've got Pat here, and I promise he's got a purpose, and we'll get into that eventually. But I wanted to tell you guys about my past weekend that I had. So I went randonauting. Pat, have you heard of this Randonautica app that everybody's crazy about?
you know what? I have because we tried to record this show last night and it didn't work out.
Yep.
Which we might as well reference right up front. It happens. It happens to some of my favorite podcasts, so there's no point pretending like it didn't happen. Yes, before last night, no, I had not heard of it, and but I was so blown away by the premise of this that I had to check it out today. So I'm a little bit more familiar than I am last night. But let's kind of turn back the clock and pretend that you're explaining this to me for the first time, as you did, last night.
I'm going to explain it to the listeners. They might not know what it is. So
fair enough.
So Randonautica is an app, and actually you might be able to explain it more than I can at this point. Randonautica is an app that you download that will give you random GPS coordinates. And what it basically does with these GPS coordinates is that it gives you coordinates to like high anomalous, high strangeness kind of places. It's kind of more of a spiritual experience than anything. But either way, you go to this location that it gives you, and it's supposed to like induce synchronicities. And a lot of people have found some, cool stuff. I've seen a lot of like abandoned buildings and shopping malls and just all kinds of things. And then there was those two kids that found they found that body in the suitcase or whatever. So that was cool. But you said you were reading about it. Did you learn anything new other than what I just said?
Randonautica. So when you first explained this to me yesterday, it sounded totally janky, and I didn't believe that it was an actual thing. And when I Googled it, immediately what came up was a New York Times article from July 31st. So just a few weeks ago. So this is very much a real thing. I did download it on my phone.
Okay.
Today at work, so I could kind of screw around with it a little bit. And yeah, I think that it really the kind of metaphysical aspects of it, the inducing synchronicities, is really built into the product description. Like that's what it's really trying to do. When you use it, obviously it uses your GPS location. So in a lot of ways, just kind of imagine like a Pokemon Go type app, but instead of using augmented reality to find little Pokemon, you're using randomly generated GPS coordinates to find, I don't know, like things that are already there, that kind of link up to whatever your intention is. And that's kind of how this works, is that you're supposed to have an intention, an idea of something in your mind. Right. And then you activate the app, and then it'll point your mapping program on your phone to a specific location in your general area. And then you're supposed to travel to that location and find something in real life that exists there that coincides with whatever your intention was when you started the app up in the first place. So I did it at work.
Yeah, that's...
Go on.
Oh, go ahead.
I said I did it at work today. And like it I was like, okay, and I thought, and then I hit like the thing, and then it like pointed me into this location like 3 blocks away that I had no intention of leaving my office and actually going to, because it's hot outside.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, well, at least I see the functionality of it. I understand how it works. What would have been there had I gone there? I don't know. But I mean, you actually field tested the app this weekend. So what was that like?
So, I mean, it was a lot of fun. At first, there's definitely a learning curve, because initially, well, like you said, like the location's extremely close, and it's like, well, we wanted to like go on an adventure. We wanted to go far away from home and find something new, and so, we had to learn that you can actually set your radius, and it still doesn't take you very far. It's still like less than 20 miles away. But when we went out, we didn't. we kind of took turns like setting the intention once we figured it out, because initially we're like, well, because we're in Dayton, Ohio, specifically Kettering. It's a suburb, so it's taking us to just like people's houses or random parking lots. It's nowhere fun. Like, you're not going to find anything fun in the
Right.
middle of Kettering. Dayton maybe, but Kettering no. And so we decided to go and get lost. Like, we have this like regular road trip that we take, and we just went out there and just took random turns and got lost in the country somewhere, and that took us about 2 hours to do. And so once we started using the app from there, knowing kind of more how it worked, we kind of took turns setting the intention and things like that. Now, I can't say that anything was, anything really significant happened. There was definitely a theme that we noticed, and the theme was black and white. We kept noticing
Okay.
things that were both, black and white. And it was, it was very interesting. And then eventually by the end of the trip, those black and white things started to like mix together. Like, it started off with like farm animals. So like we saw all black cows in a herd, then we would see all white cows in the herd. And then by the end of the trip, we were seeing black and white cows together, which is not typically common in Ohio. Usually we have all brown cows. So we have Jersey cows. So, but
That's crazy.
exciting life in Ohio. We have cows.
I know. I had no idea that you were that close to steer.
Yeah. Yep. So, it just kind of, took its turn there. I mean, nothing was inherently like creepy or scary. We ended up, like I was telling you yesterday, we ended up at that grocery store gas station, which was really weird because it was just a little gas station
with the butcher shop in it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a connection right there. Is you're spending all this time with fucking cows and steer, and then you go to a butcher shop. I mean, how did you not make that connection? Like, what was that?
Well, that's true. We saw some really cool, like, old buildings and just old timey stuff. I mean, shit like that's in those little small towns. They're
Right.
shitty towns, but they're beautiful. I mean, but it was a lot of fun. It was just things that things we never really would have came across had we not went out and done this. I'm definitely looking forward to doing it more.
Right.
I want to take what I learned and take it. I want to go down to West Virginia and use it down there. And then, I've got some other spots planned that I need to go to. And, this has now become like a part of my personal investigation. I feel like, so.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's probably not a genuine, paranormal tracking device by any means, but depending on it's an interesting way to spend some time and get out of the house, I guess, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, if you just look at the connections between the places that you hit, I mean, just look at what happened with us right here. You thought the connections were more color coded, like you saw a lot of black stuff and then a lot of white stuff and then a lot of gray stuff or whatever. And I, from what little you told me, the connection that I made was the life cycle between a steer and a butcher shop.
Yeah.
Right. So it kind of like whatever you get from it is like kind of whatever you draw from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that kind of, like I said, it's not a paranormal tracking device, but it could be an interesting way to spend an afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very personal experience. Just like, and I know the listeners hear this a lot from us. It's very subjective and personal, but it is, and it's not necessarily that it's going to take you to like weird, creepy places. It doesn't necessarily just have a list of like creepy places. Did you read any more into like how it calculates where it's taking you, or? Because I haven't yet.
No, and let's be honest. There's no, it's random because there's no way that it can clearly read your intention. You're not inputting any data. You're pressing a button and it spits out GPS coordinates. That your cell phone has no real way of interfacing with your subconscious, not even your subconscious, what you're thinking, what your intention is.
Right.
So that whole dynamic is like, there's no way to prove that. There's no way that's actually happening. So basically, all it is a random GPS generator. That's all it can be. And the fact that like it pops up on things, I mean, whether or not it's random or not so random, that's fine. But there's no way that they can like scientifically explain how this cell phone is reading your thoughts and then pointing you to a GPS location that coincides with that.
Well, right. So what it's saying, so like, when you turn it on, you get the three choices between anomaly, attractor, and void. what it's saying is that those things, well, anomaly is like a mix of the two. Attractor and void has something to do. I've seen the map. It's got something to do with some dots. I don't know. I don't know. It's got like it has a type of science to it, to not so much to where like you're saying it's reading your mind or anything like that, but these are supposed to be like high anomalous places because of the science behind it.
I don't know how true that is.
Because
I mean, it could.
something.
It
I
could
don't
be.
either. Yeah, I haven't read about it,
Right.
so I don't know.
I think it's just it just sends you to go do stuff, and if 1,000 people use it and no one finds anything of note, but the 1,001 person thinks about dolphins, and then they go to a place and there's a mural with a dolphin on it, then boom, it works.
Well,
That's the
what,
thing, is that that's all you need is the needle in the haystacks,
yeah,
the outliers, and the outliers prove the point. You know what I mean?
Well, that's what the kids that found the dead body in the suitcase, their intent was, they're thinking of travel. For real. That's not a bad joke. That's what they were thinking about. That's what they say anyway. I don't know, but
Right.
But that's what that was their thought process. And then they find a fucking body in the suitcase. Yeah, we didn't find a body or anything like that. We found a balloon, and
And what was in the balloon?
The balloon, it was like a cellophane happy birthday balloon. So the reason why that's significant is because, which I know I've kind of talked about it before on this, couple of the listeners are going to know what it is, but on Hellier, the show, which is basically kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing, documentary wise and investigation wise. They're just kind of doing more of the like religious end of it. It's really weird. Anyway, they were given these GPS coordinates by somebody, and they went to the GPS coordinates and they found a balloon. And then they continue to find these balloons in significant situations. So, it's been kind of funny because I've been kind of arguing with somebody that wants to desperately work on the documentary, and I don't want him to, because he thinks that I should be following what the Hellier crew and what they're doing, and try to jump in with them instead of doing my own investigation. And so then I find the balloon, and it's weird, but it was just a happy birthday balloon. It wasn't deflated. It was still like deflated, but it wasn't floating anymore. It was just laying in the middle of this field. And so we take it, and the person I went with, Jazz, she took it home, and she actually sent me a picture of it at her home, and it's floating. So that's kind of weird.
Wow.
But I don't know the science of helium either, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, depending on if there was a temperature change, the volume could have changed. But
yeah,
usually, I assumed it would be cooler in her home than it was outside. So, if anything, it should deflate inside. But I don't know.
Don't say that. That makes it even easier.
I don't know. I'm pretending like I know sciences, and I really don't.
Like I said, I don't study helium. I'm not a heliumologist, so
not yet.
Don't know.
But I got my whole fucking life ahead of me, so we'll see.
Now maybe you'll get into studying helium and balloons. But
sure.
I don't know. That was really the only like creepy thing that happened.
When we record this podcast for the third time, I'll have that information ready for you.
I'm sure you will.
Right? So then I'll really be prepared.
Like, damn it, not gonna look up helium. Yeah, I don't know, but it was it was a lot of fun. Like I said, I'm definitely gonna do it again.
Right. Well, hey man, anything that gets people out of the house. I mean, here's the thing: you're more likely to come across cool shit if you leave the house than if you stay inside and look at the same four walls all day.
Right.
You know what I mean? So boom, if it gets you out and it gives you a little bit of intent and it points you in a direction that's maybe the right direction, I mean, who knows? You're more likely to find something than if you never left the house in the first place. So I'd say check it out. I'd be willing to try it around me because there's lots of forest preserves. When the weather, it's like 90 here in Chicago all this week. So like, I'm not trying to go anywhere I don't have to. But when the weather cools a little bit this fall and with the dog and stuff, like, it's a reason to go exploring the forest preserves around here. And who knows,
I think you'll really enjoy it. I think you'll like it. It's like I said, at the very least, it takes you to new places that you don't normally see. It gets you out of the house. It's something to do.
Sure.
Whether or not you find a dead body, I mean, that just depends, I guess. So. But anyway,
did you want to find a dead body? Like that's the thing. Like I don't like, I can not come across a dead body and probably be okay. You know, like, it's not like you get money from it. Like, unless you're going to go through his pockets, like, what's the value in that? And finding a
I think the
corpse.
one the kids found was like really gross. I don't know. I think it like washed up ashore, so it was already like waterlogged and bloated. And
Ugh.
they didn't see it. It was like wrapped up in a bag. They just opened the suitcase and they said it smelled awful. And they called the police, and the police came out and they're like, "Oh, yeah, that's a dead body."
Have you ever seen a dead body before?
I have never like found one, but I mean, I've been to funerals and stuff like that. I took 2 years of anatomy and physiology, so
I used to be a repo man. And one night, me and my partner were driving around, and it was probably like 4 a.m. on a Wednesday or something, you know. And this car cuts across traffic in front of us. It doesn't come anywhere near to hit us, but like, you know, it's in the oncoming lane, and it veers off, goes across our lane of traffic, and smashes into the corner of a Walgreens. So we kind of just like pull over and we get out, and there's maybe like one or two other cars on the road, not very many though. And we walk up to the accident, and the guy's laying there, head back, big gash on it, but there's no blood. And you know, his car is totaled and there's steam coming out of it, whatever. And my partner gets on his cell phone and calls 911. And I'm looking at this guy, and someone walks up, another passerby that stopped, kind of walked up, and they're like, "Is he okay?" And I'm like, going like, "Sir, are you all right?" And the dude's just laying there, and I'm like, you know, he's got a pretty bad cut on his head, but he's not bleeding, you know. And the guy goes, "Oh, well, then he's probably dead." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, yeah, if his heart was pumping, that would be spraying blood all over the place."
Well,
and the fact that it's not, you know, means that his heart's probably stopped, and that's why there's so little blood. And I was like, "Oh shit!" And then we just kind of sat there and had a cigarette, waiting for the cops to show up, and then left.
Did it fuck with you at all?
No, of course not. I'm completely desensitized to that kind of thing. It did not bother me at all. It was more like, "Oh, okay," you know. And I think, and the craziest part was, mutual friend Mike Vanderbilt. I was in a band with him at the time, and I think I told that story like on stage the next show that we played.
Okay.
And I remember somebody in the audience got very upset and sick, and they were a veteran. And when I had told that story, I think it reminded them of something from their past, and it made them very upset. But I think at the time I was just kind of like,
well, that's not your fault. You know, I mean,
oh no, please, that didn't bother me either. If the dead body didn't kill me, freaking the dude out talking about the dead body. That's really
I mean, I guess when I was younger, I was like 10 or 11, and we were driving around. My mom had just gotten a convertible, so it was cool to just drive around in the convertible.
Sure, especially in Ohio.
Yeah, right. So you leave my fellow Ohioans.
I'm sure it was the talk of Dayton that weekend.
And see, I did not live in Dayton at the time. I lived in Springfield. You want to talk about some shitty shit? That's Springfield, Ohio. Anyway, so we were driving around, and this guy was on a motorcycle in front of us, and he tried to switch lanes and to the other car that was kind of in front of us / beside us, and the car hit him. And he was, I think, pretty much instantly dead. He like fell off the motorcycle, and his head was turned the wrong way, and and it was bad. So I mean, we had like front row tickets to that. But you know,
I think that would probably be a little bit more traumatic, a motorcycle accident, because then you see them get all bent out of shape and twisty and shit.
It wasn't that bad. I mean, like I said, his head was not right, but other than that, you know, his neck was very obviously broken. It wasn't bloody. It wasn't like gory or anything like that. It was just, he just looked strange. And, you know, so it wasn't that bad. And then, but I think that, you know, at some point in my childhood, I must have tried to repress it because I don't really remember all of it. You would think I would. So I know I've had to ask my mom details. It wasn't like I was that young, but I've had to ask her details about it. And then, you know, I've kind of remembered since then. But like I said, other than that, I don't think it's, you know, I don't think it was that bad. And then we think we found somebody trying to bury a dead body out in the middle of fucking nowhere where me and my friends go. And we had to call the cops, and it was weird. We saw a tarp like laying on the ground and something was under it, but like shoes were sticking out. So we go down this road. There's like a haunted road down here. It's called Fudge Road. And there's all kinds of weird shit down it. Anyway, for us, the scary part isn't so much Fudge Road, it's like the drive to get there. And we found this one street, and it starts with this really old bridge. And then all of a sudden, like once you get over the bridge, you're not on like a road anymore, you're on like a dirt path. And so nobody's ever back there. So we always, we used to drive around and do our drugs and whatever. And the one night we're out there and we see a car parked in one of the cornfields. And like I said, there's a man, he's like in the trunk for something, but there's the big tarp and then the shoes. And so we get off the road and we call the police and we're trying to explain to them the location, but we don't know how because the road doesn't have a name. It's just a dirt road. So I don't know whatever happened. I don't know if they ever, found the guy or, what went wrong, but we just have always assumed ever since then that guy's buried there now. So
can I tell a similar story that kind of ties into the proposed topic for this week's episode? So when it was right after high school. Right after high school had ended. And, how it was for me and my friends is most of my friends went away to college. I stayed in Chicago because I was going to film school here in Columbia, downtown Chicago. So I didn't go anywhere. And most like the people that were left behind that didn't go away to school or that went to like local colleges or whatever, it was a weird mixed mash of people. And one night I found myself hanging out with this group of guys that were really into off-roading. And one of the guys had like this big, like Dodge Ram truck with a lift kit, right? And we would go off-roading behind this like banquet hall in our area, which like we live in. I grew up in the city. I grew up in Chicago,
right.
But you don't really have to go too far to find these little forest preserves or a couple square miles of wooded area. And we found one of these areas and we would drive his truck back there and drink a case of beer and smoke an eighth of weed and listen to the Loop or classic rock or whatever. And then
sure.
Come barreling out at 12:30 in the morning. And we did this a couple times. And one night we're out there and I, hopped out of the truck to like kind of walk off and take a piss. And I come back and there's these two guys talking to my friends in the truck. Okay. And I kind of come up behind them from where I was coming out of the woods after peeing. And they're kind of startled a little bit. And they're like, well, hey, what are you doing here? And I'm like, what are you doing here? And they're like, how many of you guys are out here? And I'm like, kind of getting a bad vibe from them. And I'm like, oh, we're just, finishing up and we're headed back. And they're like, okay. And we didn't talk for that long, and I'm not going to try to invent dialogue, but it was a very like just kind of like I could tell we surprised them, but it wasn't, the thing didn't sit right with me, the encounter, but it was very kind of innocuous. And so the guys kind of go off, and I get back in the car. And I go to my friends like, who the fuck were those guys? And they're like, I don't know, man. They're just some dudes. And I'm like, some dudes. I'm like, we're in the middle of the forest preserve. Like we had to drive like your fucking jacked up truck out here. What dudes? I'm like, they don't have a dog with them. Like they're not walking a dog.
No, they're
what are these? What are these?
Obviously through the woods.
Yeah, I mean, one thing was like two guys walking a dog. I'm like, were they blowing each other? And then were they growing weed or something? Like, what was this about? And my friends are like, why do you ask so many fucking questions? Like, don't worry about it, And of course, I'm like, no, this is like, and I, start to do the whole like, we need to get out of here. I got a bad vibe. And eventually we leave, right? Nothing happens. So like a couple weeks later, probably not even a couple weeks, probably like the next week or a couple days later, they're like, hey, do you want to go back out off-roading? And I won't even lie and say that my like better instincts told me not to go. I might have just had something else to do that night, but I didn't go with them.
Okay.
And they ended up getting so drunk that they couldn't get the truck out of the forest, out of like the little, like the woods and stuff, right? Like it got stuck in some mud or something. And they left it and they had to walk all the way back. Well, they go back the next day and the truck is completely stripped and destroyed. And they had probably left it for like 6 hours, right? It probably got stuck at like midnight on their way back out. and then they came back at like 6, 7 the next morning, and then boom, the whole thing's destroyed. And suddenly now they were like, well, who the fuck were those guys out there?
Well,
Those are probably the guys that destroyed my truck. And I'm like, yeah, they probably fucking were. And they're like, well, who were they? And I'm like, I have no idea, and we never really did figure it out, but they were obviously out there for a reason.
sure.
Could they have been growing weed? We don't know. Could they have been Satanists or something? That's like a big kind of like local legend about where I live, like on the south side of Chicago, is
Okay.
that because I'm not too far from Bachelor's Grove.
Uh-huh.
And are you familiar with that? I don't know if stories of that have made its way out.
I don't think so. I haven't heard, at least I don't, probably. I mean, I've heard
It's one of those old cemeteries that there's a lot of photographic evidence of orbs and stuff like that. And it's probably like 2 miles away from like where I'm sitting right now. It's very close to us. And also where I live, Archer Avenue kind of runs through. And that's an old Indian trading trail that goes back like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, right? Where like Indians would like go to Lake Michigan and capture fucking beavers or whatever, and then walk through or whatever. So like, there's some history to this area, even having it be like a city like Chicago, and all growing up, and this might have just been a byproduct of me growing up in the '80s, where there was kind of the satanic panic.
The satanic panic going on was a big thing.
Right. But I had an uncle that worked in a mom and pop camera store back when those were like a thing, when people actually, had to get their film developed. And he would tell us stories about the shit that he would develop, people's like sex tapes and stuff and like whatever.
Okay.
But some of it was also the local suburban police departments, their surveillance footage of these occult groups out in the woods by us. And the different things that they would be doing, and whether or not it was like highly organized or it was just some fucking drunken metalheads trying to be evil or something.
Sure. Well,
I don't know.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, that's what the guy at the Mothman Museum tells me not to go. It keeps insisting for me to not go out and go walking around the TNT area specifically because of the satanic cults out there. And I don't know what to think of that. I mean, I don't, I haven't seen one yet. But I mean, if I, acted like I wasn't a little cautious of it, I mean, I'd be lying. But the locals always say, like, if you're going to go out there, you need to make sure you put a note on your car for like the time and date that you left and like all these precautions. And I'm like, what's so scary about it? And I kind of told the viewers about it the last episode, but, Ivy actually went down with me to West Virginia and another friend. And we were looking on the satellite view. We were down there at the TNT area. And we were looking at the satellite view, and we noticed that there was like a house that had no top on it. At least it looked like a house, had absolutely no top on it. And then maybe a bunker that looked like it also didn't have the top on it. Well, I figured, well, hell, that might be where the explosion happened. Let's go down there. Well, you couldn't get to it on one side of the road, but we saw like an actual road named on Google Maps that we could get down. I'm like, cool, well, let's go down that way. And you couldn't get to it. It was completely blocked off. There was like 3 or 4 different ways to try to get down there, and we tried every one, and you couldn't get down there. But there's a house that looks like it's from the satellite view, looks like it's lived in. There's cars and everything outside of it. Well, it's more like a trailer. So who knows? I mean, obviously they get in and out of the house somehow, so there must be a way back there. Could just be private property. Could be a satanic cult that doesn't want anybody back there.
I mean, I guess, yeah, I don't know. Another story about kind of piggybacking off that, moving slowly into the UFO direction, which is what we're going to try to do today.
Yeah.
So I had a friend that, and this has always been a very, 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 very interesting story for me. I had a friend that about maybe 15 years ago went missing. And, he came home from work one night, and he lived with his parents. They had like a 2-bedroom condo or something. Comes home, says, hi to the parents. They're watching TV in the front room. He goes in his room and he showers or does whatever, his post-work ritual.
Right.
And his parents go to bed, and he goes, okay, I'm going to watch some TV in the front room and then, go to bed. They get up in the middle of the night, and they don't, they pass by the front room and the TV's on, but he's not there. And they had just kind of assumed that he had fallen asleep on the couch, and they just didn't see him because he was laying on the couch or whatever, And they wake up the next morning, and they see that he's gone, and the TV's still on, and his glasses are on the coffee table. And they're like, okay, that's odd. And they go outside, but his truck is there. So they're like, okay, well, he didn't go anywhere. Maybe someone came and picked him up. They're a little bit worried, but it's not anything just yet, right?
Right.
So 24 hours goes by, and no one hears from him, and no one's seen him, and the Facebook posts go up, and blah blah blah. And sure enough, the guy's nowhere to be seen.
There was Facebook 15 years ago?
MySpace or whatever. Yeah, there was Facebook 15 years ago. I'm pretty sure there was. Yeah, because like social network, I'm sure. Whatever. Anyway, trust me, that's not the most unbelievable part of the story. Okay. If you want to pick it apart later, but yeah, MySpace, they're fucking hot or not or whatever the fuck they want on. So like, anyway, the social media posts go up. Have you seen this guy? Blah blah blah. And let's just say that like that happened, the dude disappears on a Monday, right? So by Wednesday, they're starting to like canvass the area. They get the dogs involved. They have a dog come out, and it sniffs, picks up his scent at the house, and it goes down about 2 miles and goes to this forest preserve. And then the dogs lose the scent, right? So there's train tracks that run through the forest preserve. So they're thinking, did this guy hop on a fuking train and go somewhere?
Yeah.
Did he fall asleep on the train tracks, and was he hit?
Yeah.
Was any of this stuff happening, right? And they there's no sign of him. They can't find anything. And the scent goes basically into the middle of this like clearing and then just disappears, right? So like, people are saying UFOs. We're not saying it like to the police, but like amongst each other, like, oh, maybe he was taken by aliens. Because there's no explanation. There's no note. Yeah. Everyone knew the dude. He was more or less happy-go-lucky. He was a metalhead, and he was in a metal band and shit like that. So he really liked his band, and he was into all that shit. And he had found his niche. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So by Friday, they organize a search party to basically everyone line up shoulder to shoulder and march from one end of this forest preserve to the next, right?
Okay.
Because it's a forest preserve, but I mean, it's a forest preserve outside of Chicago. It's not that fucking big.
Right.
They go from one end to the next, and they find nothing. And then the next day, they go from the other end and back again. Nothing. Can't find this kid, no trace, right? Monday morning comes along, and a jogger finds his body on one of the trails with a shotgun blast to the head.
What? Okay.
And the police rule it as a suicide. And what they say happened is this guy got up in the middle of the night, decided to kill himself, took a shotgun that he did not have a FOID card to own. He had no way of legally owning it. Leaves his glasses at home, walks 2 miles in the middle of the dark, in the middle of the night in the pitch black dark, carrying the shotgun to this forest preserve where he blows his head off. Nobody finds the body for a week.
Right.
And then it suddenly turns up Monday morning on a jogger's path.
And right. I mean, obviously, in an obvious area.
And everyone was just like, oh man, that's tragic. And once again, I'm the kid in the back of the pickup truck like, are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? Like, this isn't legit. And everyone's like, yeah, it's kind of weird, but like, dude, what do you think happened? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what happened, but I know that's.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know what happened, but that story sounds like bullshit, But then it's like, let the parents, like I'm going to stand up at the dude's wake and be like, he was murdered, But I know like his sister, like his parents, like grieved and set up like a memorial thing for him. And like his sister, who was like just a year or two older than us, she moved out of town. Like she left. And every once in a while, like I'll see some people and like that, mutual friends or whatever. And it's not like every time I see one of these people I bring it up, but sometimes it'll inevitably, if we're all together and drinking, that story will kind of come up. And it just always baffles me. Like some people be like, yeah, that I always thought that was weird.
Right.
Okay,
that is a very strange story. Did anybody claim that he did in fact own this shotgun? I mean, I would start there, I guess.
No, and no one could really figure it. They figured someone gave it to him, and whoever gave it to him obviously was a friend and maybe didn't know what he was going to use it for and didn't want to admit to illegally giving him the shotgun in the first place.
Well, okay.
Which, dude, we don't hang out. I'm the gun guy out of all my friends. We don't hang out with gun people. I am the fucking gun people. And I didn't have a shotgun back then, nor would I have just given it to somebody. But like, we don't hang out with those kind of people. That to me is very preposterous. And anybody, and I mean, I knew this dude for years and years and years. Anybody that has glasses knows that when you need glasses, when you're dependent on glasses, you don't go anywhere without them, and you don't get up and leave them there.
That's true.
And walk. That was always the weirdest thing to me, was the glasses. That's what seemed to me like he left under very hinky circumstances.
So what do you think happened?
I think that either it was an internet hookup gone wrong.
Okay.
Not that necessarily that would be speaking disparagingly of him.
Sure.
But I think either it was something like that. I think that some kind of mind control or something that he was being remote piloted. That's why he would get up and walk like that. I don't know exactly the science of like the dogs smelling him and like following his scent. I don't know if he necessarily had to walk that distance for his scent to track that far, or if he could have been in the car and the dogs followed the scent that way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know the science behind like dogs and police dogs and how they smell shit out. I think the fact that the dogs were able to track his scent to that location is very interesting.
He would have. I mean, I know that much. True crime is another passion of mine, and so in order for the dogs to have followed that scent, they, especially like if they tracked from the house to the reserve, he would have had to have walked it.
Right.
So if he wasn't like physically on the ground, if he was in a vehicle, it's moving too fast for a dog to catch up on. But there are some flaws in cadaver dog science. However, he was ultimately found in that reserve. So,
right.
I mean, obviously there's something there. Not to say that he hadn't been dumped. I mean, maybe if it was like you said, like a internet meeting gone wrong or something like that, especially at that time, I was meeting people off the internet around then, a lot. And, it was kind of it was started to be the thing to do at that time. If somebody would have, assumed that because they searched the area, they could dump him there.
Well, yeah, and if he had gotten in the car, and I think like listen, I'm a very creative person. I could paint all kinds of really horrible scenarios of how that man spent his last few hours, right? Either in terrible mental turmoil that resulted in him taking his own life, him potentially being captured or something like that, where he didn't die on Monday. Maybe he died on fucking Thursday, and they dumped the body. I mean, are you familiar with the smiley face killers at all?
I mean, a little bit, yeah.
So that's something where these people go missing, and then the young men go missing, and then they're found in shallow bodies of water or adjacent to shallow bodies of water, and they've all been drowned, but they're not necessarily in water. And it usually so the physical evidence tends to suggest that they were alive. They haven't been dead that entire time. They were kept somewhere else.
Right.
And then eventually killed and dumped. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's kind of a horrific thing to consider, is that this guy, this person who was a friend of mine was, whatever.
Yeah. Subject to something like that.
Right. And that's the thing, is that like, then when you start dishing out those theories, it's like, Jesus Christ, man. Like, it's your buddy. Like, it's not that you're not supposed to sit here and like imagine these like sadistic, terrible scenarios for someone that you care about. That isn't it almost
side of that? Kind of.
What? Hello. Can
you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, you cut out for a second. You said, "Isn't it almost?"
Oh, I said it's sadistic to kind of imagine these scenarios of what could have happened. But I feel like, the alternative is to just think that, okay, he was that depressed and that miserable and that isolated and that alone that he committed suicide.
But who wants that to be the reality of it?
But that's easier to wrap your head around.
That's true. Well, what you were
You know
kind
what
of
I
getting
mean?
at was, the possible, a possible abduction or, something like that, which, we've seen like cases of people going missing, where it's been played with the idea of whether or not it was something, Fortean. We were kind of actually, when we tried to record last night, we kind of, just barely touched on the missing 411 thing, which I think has to do with Bigfoot, I believe.
Yeah, Bigfoot being ultra terrestrial
Right.
and having to do with all these disappearances that happen along in a lot of the state parks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's like the basis of it. Like I said, I know there's like a whole documentary and there's books. I haven't gotten that far yet. Because there's a lot, there's so much. Once you kind of have to pick a rabbit hole and go down it and
Right.
see. And sometimes you end up, inside of another rabbit hole in that one. So it just depends. And this is definitely going to be one of those. So, but I don't know too much about it. But speaking of things we didn't really know too much about, you said you had actually read more about the Navy disclosure. Is that right, or the Pentagon disclosure?
Right. So what happened was, we were talking about current events yesterday,
Yeah.
and obviously the most prominent current event in when it comes to the paranormal is the Pentagon disclosure. And really, what had happened was, and we kind of went back and forth about how it's not really as jarring as people make it out to be. So basically, what happened was, of course, it all comes down to money. And there was a congressional hearing going over the Pentagon's budget,
Right.
and they were talking about these programs that exist to investigate anomalous aircraft, right?
Right.
And more importantly, how they relate to some of these UFO sightings happen over military installations or in regards to our military craft, right?
Right.
And we want to make sure that this isn't, the China or something with some new technology that we're behind the curve on, right?
Right.
And the people that head up this organization that's kind of researching these things went on record to say, no, these are not terrestrial craft that we're being outmaneuvered by, that are interfering with our military installations. We believe these are crafts, and we have seen debris from these crafts that suggests that they're from other planets.
Right. So it's not a secret military operation in Russia or China or anything like that they're now worried about, which I guess is why they, kind of ties into the Space Force and like funding a Space Force, because in military speak, they could potentially be a threat to us and our military.
Right. Well, and that's kind of what I was joking around about yesterday, is that this is such a, if this is, people say that this is disclosure, that we're so close to disclosure now. And I guess kind of we are, but we are in a very unsexy way.
Yeah.
This is definitely like the busted down, gritty reimagining of what we thought UFO disclosure would be like in the 90s.
Right.
This is not the UFO disclosure that X-Files promised.
Yeah.
This is like the cable access version of it,
It's
where
very
basically the government admits that like these crafts are real. We've been studying them for a while and we just don't know what they are. There's no secret treaties. It's not that abductions have been sanctioned in return for like cell phone technology or something like that. You know what I mean? This is very much like, we have this shit, we don't know what it does, and we don't know who these people are.
Well, which one thing that could be suggested with this, you mentioned like there's no treaties and blah blah blah. Well, that's not necessarily true, Pat. It could be that we do have treaties, and that's why our government's so concerned, is because whoever we made treaties with back in the day is breaking that treaty.
Well, right. That was, so I mean, have you ever read Behold the Pale Horse by William Coopersmith?
I have not.
William Cooper. So he had written a book that suggested that Eisenhower had a treaty with the extraterrestrials back in the 50s, and that the large-scale abductions that were coming, basically that it was all a trick, that these creatures were not aliens, they were basically demons or something, and that the abductions, a certain percentage were allowed, but there was supposed to be like a list that they would be able to be there that would be monitored or something, right? So the aliens would say, okay, we're going to abduct 1,000 people a year. These are the 1,000 we're going to pick. The government signs off on it. Fine, do what you want to do. And then at some point, the government finds out that it's not 1,000, it's 100,000. And they freak out and they, kill all of the entities that are, we have like kind of a relationship with that are living in some underground bunker in Dulce, New Mexico. And there's a fight breaks out and boom, boom, we kill them. And now we're at the point where we have parts of their technology. We know parts of their plan, but we're no longer working together with them. That sounds absolutely fucking insane to me.
I mean, it does sound insane, but
I think it's a good movie. It's a movie that I would watch. If it was a Netflix show, I would binge the shit out of it.
This makes sense with the timeline. So that kind of does make sense with the timeline of events that we have. And then, like I said, if the concern is not so much like whether these things exist, for one, I don't really know anybody that doesn't believe in aliens, just in general. I think pretty much everybody's on the same page that aliens exist. The universe, multiverse, whatever is too big for it not to be. And, but like for two, not that, aliens exist, but the concern could be again that they have a treaty that was broken. Now, I do think it's a little insane to think that like, especially if that guy was saying that they were demons, like we can't fucking kill demons. We're humans. But, not that every piece of the story is true, but some of that does make sense to kind of what we're dealing with now. And
that's only if you prescribe religious significance to the concept of them being demons. If you just say, hey, look, like think about it in terms of doom, right? Like those things weren't really demons.
Right.
They were from different dimensions, right? And they came through because we were trying to teleport them. I love how I'm bringing this all back to Doom. But like, or like Event Horizon, right?
Sure.
It's not necessarily that they went to hell in the biblical sense. It's that they went to this dimension that was based on chaos or whatever.
Right.
And that to our rational minds, that felt like hell. And if you take it a step further back and say that the Bible is actually influenced by these different concepts, then you could see that our perception of religion is already based on this multidimensional science. It's not, you know what I mean? Like it all kind of piggyback into each other. They're not really angels and demons. There's positive entities and negative entities from different dimensions, from different parts of the hologram that are overlapping, and we kind of occupy the middle space of it.
And that's kind of been the idea that I've been playing with everything that I've been putting together is that, what we perceive as God or gods or godlike or supernatural, it's not really. It's just that we have no other way to logically explain it. So that's what we call it. And
sure.
They're just stronger than we are. But, either way.
Well, that's what we were talking about yesterday when we talked about the UFO narrative and how it's changed over the years. Is that, originally when all this stuff kind of came into, after the Roswell crash, they were aliens. They were from outer space. They were from another planet. They got onto their rocket ship and they flew their rocket ship here, and then their rocket ship crashed, right? And then that's what the narrative was. And then if you look at like the Betty and Barney Hill incident, and you look at some of the incidents that follow where people had communication with these beings, and they're being shown star maps and they're being told that they're from specific constellations. All of this stuff kind of married itself to the thought that these were beings from another planet, right? And now we're at the point where our science realizes that there's no, like, just how we understand combustion and like actually like physics, like, no, they didn't fly here from another planet. That's fucking ridiculous. The fuel doesn't exist. It would take entirely too long. If they were that technologically advanced, it's more than likely that there's some kind of teleportation going on where they're moving through dimensions, or they're moving through time. And if so, now we see this like, okay, they're not extraterrestrial, they're not from another planet, they're ultra terrestrial, and that's where the narrative kind of moved forward. And that's where I feel that it was last at before. Now it's like we don't know anything. we you know what I mean? Like everything's been busted down. And we're back to like these are rocket ships again, which I think is fucking bullshit. Anyone that knows enough about science will tell you that. So I feel like the narrative kind of changes with the culture at all times. And if you go back even further, it's a matter. It was magic. You know what I mean? These were fairies. These were leprechauns. These were, angels that came
Exactly.
down on fiery
Right.
chariots and did whatever. So this explanation of these things from the outside that come in and visit us periodically, the narrative is always matched where our culture is at. And if we're a culture that believes in magic and spirituality, then that's how we describe it. If we're a culture that's got our mind set on going to the moon and
Mhm.
rocket ships, then that's how we explain it. And now that we're more into metaphysics and string theory and different dimensions and stuff, now that's how we're explaining it all over again.
Right.
And you have to at least appreciate that the story keeps fucking changing, and there's certain things about our current story that contradict things that we believed were true in the past.
Well, and that's so one thing I had to accept when I started chasing the Mothman and learned that it was not just about the Mothman was that, there's a good possibility that we as a species may not ever be able to know because we are so simple that we may not even have the possibility of knowing. Like, we might
I'd
not.
hate to believe that.
It would suck, right? Well, obviously, I'm still
I
doing
don't like
what I'm
people
doing.
telling me I'm stupid, Ashley
But
Hill.
it's possible. It's very possible that we just
Right.
don't know. If I tell you 10,000 years, you have no idea what 10,000 years, you don't know what that is. You have no way to perceive that. You can't. And it's a possibility again that we can't even perceive what these things are, or, we might have an idea. But then, like you said, it all ends up going full circle. One thing that I haven't really announced yet to everybody is that, fuck, I don't even think you know this, is that I have an interview coming up with Tanya Derenberger. That is Woody Derenberger's daughter. Woody Derenberger is the guy who has a lifelong relationship with Indrid Cold. And Tanya says that she still maintains the relationship with Indrid Cold and his family. Are you familiar with Indrid Cold?
Was that the guy with the signals, with the flashlight signals or something?
No, he came down one day. Woody Derenberger was on his way home from work, and he came down in his spaceship and talked to him. And Derenberger claims that he then had a lifelong relationship with them. Says that he's been to Indrid's planet, and they're very close, and just all kinds of crazy shit. I never really gave this story much attention. Because I'd heard rumors that Woody says that he went to the planet at one point and was impregnated there because male or females can be impregnated. He was impregnated, and all kinds of crazy shit. I'm just like, this is not okay. He's just crazy. Right. But since then I've come to find out those rumors are false. It was actually kind of a joke that he had kind of made up because everybody already thought he was nuts, so might as well go all the way. And then Tanya has since then, he's dead. His daughter has carried his story and insists that that this is all real, and her dad was really, he was really ostracized for this, so it's if there isn't any truth to it, why would you then continue to carry on your dad's crazy story? Wouldn't you want to distance yourself from that?
Not if it's making you money.
But it's not. She lives in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and let me tell you.
Yeah, but you don't know what you don't look at the woman's taxes.
I promise you. Nobody that makes any money at all lives in fucking Parkersburg.
Or maybe she wants to believe her dad. I'm not trying to shit on this woman's story. I 100%. I'm not familiar enough with it. I really don't know. But people have all kinds of reasons for lying.
Sure they do. Absolutely. And I have to go into everything with skepticism. However, she made up this, not this story, but she made an announcement in September of 2018, an official announcement that Indrid Cold had died. And he had died in some spaceship accident. But she maintains that he probably faked his own death. There's a whole story behind it. However,
see, this is what I'm talking.
Well, hold on. But she still talks to his. So Indrid Cold and one of his sons died. He's got 3 sons. She still talks to 2 of his sons that frequently come and visit her. And so I'm like, okay, well, I need to build up a relationship with Tanya. Because if the sons are real, then the only way that I can get to them is to sit down and talk to her, about it and get and then go to her, Christmas dinner party. And
right.
And so it's a possibility. But the point is that it's kind of come again full circle back to the story that I gave absolutely no credibility to whatsoever, to now, I mean, what choice do I have but to entertain the idea? What choice do I have?
Oh, I would
See.
do the interview 100%, 100%. But I'd be fully prepared to talk to schizophrenic. You know what I mean?
That,
Like
and I've thought of that too, because schizophrenia is genetic. And so I'm like, well,
right.
that would make sense, why it would go on through the family. But, that's, like I said, I'm excited to see, where it goes and what it turns into. She was more than happy to be a part of the documentary. I know that she doesn't get a lot of media attention or anything like that. Nobody's ever heard of this woman. And so I'm like, okay. But, I tracked her down, and we're going to do it hopefully after this, pandemic, eventually is over. But, I do really want you to tell your story. So this,
Unfortunately, we're at the 55-minute mark, so we're going to have to come back next week.
you're probably right about that. Yeah, because I want people to hear it. It's fascinating, because you're right. It is. We're going to get into other psychological stuff with that. So,
Right. And I honestly, I got to take my dog to the groomer.
Oh
I
no.
made an appointment days ago, but no, I mean, I definitely want to, I definitely want to do this again, because this was a good part one.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that before we get off here, is there anything that you want to push or anything like that you want to get out there?
People always ask me this, and I really don't. I think just the Twitter. I mean, on it, like I do a lot of different random shit, and at some point, I always pimp it on my Twitter. So check me out on Twitter. It's Frost2112 Jack. I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you follow Ashley on Twitter, so it'll be even easier to find.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that's it. A friend of mine is producing she's putting together this movie called The People's Joker, where she's taking a bunch of footage from all the different Joker incarnations and Batman incarnations of like all the different movies and the TV show and stuff like that. And she's an editor for the Tim and Eric show. She's editing together a brand new story, and she's using like the deep fake technology. And I've read the script, and it's awesome. And I'm shooting some stuff for it. I'm a producer on it. So check that out. Vera Drew. She's on Twitter. Vera Drew 22, The People's Joker movie.
That sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah, it is.
Check that out.
And the fact that, like, I'm like, you're going to get sued. She's like, I don't give a fuck. I'm like, yeah, I know. I don't give a fuck either.
Sometimes they do like that in this business.
What are they going to do? But I think one last thing, and then we'll kind of close it. I think, honestly, with you kind of said it best yourself with about everybody kind of believing in aliens at this point, and with this recent like soft disclosure, I think really, if you're not, if you were to ask me today what I honestly believe is going on, I would say that I think that there's some kind of secret space program. And I would say that I think that a terrestrial secret space program. And I think that that's what a lot of these crafts are. A lot of these anomalous sightings is byproducts of this secret space program.
And you're saying it's something that we created or are creating? Oh.
Right. And I think that this UFO stuff is a false flag. I think it's bullshit. Is the point that I'm at now with it. But what I believe changes with the wind.
Just like all of us good investigators, right? New information comes up, or even old information, and we're like, well, here we are again.
Because I've followed the story, and I've seen it take many different the narrative take many different turns, and where we're at now, it's just like, oh, come the fuck on. Like, I remember the most outrageous thing in the world being in 2000 when like the second George Bush ran for president. And I was like, there's another one? I'm like, wasn't a Bush already president? How could they make another Bush president? Like, doesn't that seem like fucked up? Like, he's not going to call his dad and ask what to do? Like that, and that was like the height of incredibility. It was like the fact that there was going to be another Bush in the White House. And like, things have only gotten more insane since then.
Oh my God, yeah.
So yeah, that's just kind of where I'm at with things right now.
That's fair. That's all right.
So...
well, I'll throw you some more reading material, and maybe you'll have a different opinion by this time next week. We'll see.
Sure.
All right then, Pat. Well, and everybody else, we will be back next Wednesday for more weirdness. We'll see you then.